Hello, welcome to the Splintered Image on YouTube, or welcome back if you've been here before. This is the second in a series of art discussions. Began with my print Tentacle Titan. I'm not going to give much background. I already did that with Tentacle Titan. I gave a little bit of background into my art schooling and stuff like that and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check out that video. I'm going to kind of get into it right away. I just will recap that there's a reason why I do a video about my own artwork instead of another person's artwork, especially like a famous artist. Well, actually, I will be discussing a famous artist in this video. I'll be incorporating that into it. But eventually, I would like to do more discussion on other artists or different types of artwork. Right now, my main thing is I'd like to discuss technique and practice. And by taking a piece of my own work, it's not about, claiming that it's anything more than an experiment, my personal art experiment. I can actually discuss the technique because I was there for it. I know what went into doing it, and I can also, over the course of that, impart some art knowledge, some terminology, and those kinds of things. So this is a painting called Sygnet 1. I do have still my my red pointer, so if I need to gesture anything inside the field of view, but most of the time it's just going to be the painting on display. I may zoom into it from time to time. So this was a painting done in 1990, 1991. It's the title's a bit of a controversy because originally it was a different name. It changed into Sygnet 1. I'm not exactly sure when. The original title was Cygnus 1 with an S, and neither title really has a lot of meaning, a lot of important meaning. So it's kind of irrelevant, but that's what it is, the name of it right now. This is a combination. It's acrylic and enamel, like latex enamel, house enamel, on canvas board. And it was done during a period of my time. I started in high school experimenting with a little bit of abstraction in the footsteps of an artist named Jackson Pollock. This was a decision I made based on a suggestion from an art instructor, actually the one art instructor I had when I was in high school, and kind of said, oh, why don't you paint like Jackson Pollock or try something like that? So just a little bit of background, and this is where my my own art discussion about my personal stuff can cross over into a large art discussion and go into different fields and different time periods of art as they apply to something I may have done. So in this case, Jackson Pollock was an American artist. He was born in Cody, Wyoming, and he only lived for 44 years. He died in a car wreck because of alcoholism. He was under the influence when he was driving, struggling with alcohol his entire life. But he was a part of the abstract art movement, a big part of the abstract art movement in the kind of the early to mid part of the 20th century. And he became known for splatter paintings, splattering the paint on, flinging it with a stick or whatever onto large canvases. Usually were spread on the floor so he could actually go around the canvas and paint from every side of it and see the painting from every side. And he did a lot of really crazy stuff when he was painting. He'd almost kind of dance around the canvas, and it was, you could say it was the flow of energy going through his body. He was channeling that into the painting, how he was laying the drips down, go around the canvas. I mean, it's a nice thing to do when you have a big studio and you're a well-known artist and you can afford a loft or something like that to paint in, and you can just kind of fling your paint every which way and be as chaotic as you want to be. But it resulted in some really interesting work. And, some people were really into it. Other people were not. Some art critics, kind of derided it and weren't a big fan of it. I've always liked Jackson Pollock's work, and some of it's very, very, very intense and very intense to look at because there's so much going on in the works. And that's one of the things that intrigued me. So on my website, the very first video, or on my YouTube channel, is a video where I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the channel. and I had the camera pointed at a painting, a drip painting I did called River of Drips. And it was a large canvas I did when I was in high school. One of the earlier ones I did in my Jackson Pollock phase. And it's a really interesting thing to work with something that you can layer up and you can add a lot of different textures to it in the process. So I'm not going to show any of Pollock's work in this video. Down the road, I could always do a deep dive and go into, fair use and that kind of stuff, and displaying his artwork and discuss it. But it's very easy. You can go on Google Images, put in Jackson Pollock. I will have already put the name up on the screen at some point here. So you can go on Google Images, and there's tons of artworks, and there's some cool galleries. There's a gallery on there called trendygallery.art, or trendgallery.art, where you can buy different pieces. There's a bunch of online galleries you can buy the prints and stuff like that. Get an idea of what Jackson Pollock was all about. But he was did his own thing. He made his mark on the art world and the abstract art world. He died very young. He was 44 years old when he died. So I went through a little phase in high school and in a little bit beyond high school. I think this painting here was done just after, toward the end of it. One of my only commissioned works I did, I've only done a couple of commissioned works, and I did do a drip painting for a friend of my mother's at the time. That I did the design, did the like a 50-50 for the supplies and the commission, and sold the drip painting. I do have pictures of it somewhere. One of the few things I actually did for another person. This was one. So Sygnet 1 is a painting I did toward the end of my drip painting phase, but it's one of my all-time favorite ones. So I did some on kind of cardboard. I did very large ones. I did one in my high school. It's in my high school yearbook, where I laid out 3 huge canvases out behind the art building. And there's a photo of me working on these big 3 canvases to make a triptych, basically. Although it's more like just a single image in 3 pieces, which I've done a couple of times. And never really finished that painting. Still has yet to be finished. It's in a storage facility somewhere, collecting rat droppings, probably, unfortunately. So the process of doing this was, in the early stages, I would basically take dowel rods. So what you need is like this here, like a paintbrush. You have a sharp, kind of a point on this. So technically, a paintbrush could be used for that. And there's different ways you can do the drips on the painting. You can kind of drizzle them on, which is how this was done. Kind of like you're putting icing on a cupcake or something like that, or brownie, whatever. And you can drizzle the paint on there and give it that kind of like lazy look to it. You can also, what Jackson Pollock did a lot of times, was actually fling the painting. So you dip your pointed stick or your brush or whatever into a can of paint, and then you just kind of whip it and fling it at the painting, and so you get kind of almost like splatter marks with it. Then you can also just do, like, let the paint drip. And there's, a lot of times when you're drizzling or you're flinging, it drips anyway. It just creates all the drip marks. So another artist, Seurat, was known for his color theory. And one of his most famous paintings, which is, I believe, in the Art Institute of Chicago, is Sunday Afternoon at Le Grand Jatte, which is a massive painting done with little dots of color. So color theory is something that I've never been an expert at because I haven't studied it really in depth. Seurat was an amazing color theorist, and how colors all play a role. How any artist understands, or has to understand on a basically rudimentary level, the ways different colors correspond to one another, the ways contrasting or complementary colors, the way they offset one another, and how they play together in the image. So one of the things I wanted to do with this painting is I wanted to give it a background of acrylic paint and then put the drips on top of that. So what I did for the background was acrylic, and I actually used, and amazingly I still have, I don't have the sticks. The sticks were basically dowel rods. I took the dowel rods and whittled them down to tips, and I had about 4 or 5 of those. I still have those. They're in a box of art supplies, probably in my storage unit. Again, collecting rat droppings for what it's worth. Hopefully not too many rat droppings, that could be very dangerous. Anyway, whittle the sticks down and use the sticks and put them in a can of paint, like a can of house paint, to do a lot of the drips that I was working with at a time. But I also did, and I do have this was my roller that I had at the time that I bought. So it's just a rubber roller, and you basically use the roller and you roll the paint on. So all these layers, the green, the yellow, up to the red, was laid down with acrylic paint with a roller. And then as the beads of paint were laid down, the roller blends them together. It's not a perfect blend, and there's a lot of pros and cons to using acrylic paint. One of the pros for me is that it dries quickly. You can layer it. You could paint on top of something, but also when it dries quickly, it makes it harder to blend it. It makes it more, because it basically turns into plastic when it dries, acrylic paint. So that was the thing. I wanted to have a transition from green to red. There's very little orange in here. You can see the yellow band. And then the paints that I put on top of that were chosen to stand out against that background. So the bright red drips, or the white, especially the white and the dark blue. So because there's no blue in the image. So the blue stands out very much against the background. And the white also, because the lightest shade you see in here is the yellow. So the white drips stand out against that background, the dark blue drips. Some of the drips, like the yellow or the pink also stands out against the green. It vanishes when you hit to the red. But then those pink drips suddenly pop out down here, which also gives an interesting effect to the layers. So the one thing about a drip painting for me is that very interesting is that depending on how much you build up on it and how many layers you do, when you look at it, and one of these days I'll do my my large painting River of Drips and go into how that was done, because that's a lot more complicated than this. This is a small painting. I chose it because I like the interplay of colors, and I like how this, for me personally, how it turned out. And it's a simpler one to discuss. But in that painting, there's a lot more on it. There's a lot more drips. And the thing is, you can sit there and you can look at the different layers. You can peer into the different layers going on in the canvas. Where a static image, or even a very dimensional image, there are certain spaces in the painting, right? There's certain open spaces, closed spaces, light and dark spaces that are very clearly defined. With something like this, it's a little bit more chaotic, and you can kind of spend a lot of time peering into the different layers. Almost in your mind, imagine what layer went down first. It's impossible to say, because everything just kind of interlaces at a certain point, all the different kinds of drips. So that's basically my painting Sygnet 1. It's inspired by Jackson Pollock. And again, I would highly recommend going and checking out some of his works. Some really, really amazing stuff. Obviously, you can look at it online. It's not quite the same as if you go into a gallery and see some of these really large canvases up close. It's been a long time since I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, since I've seen any of Pollock's work. I think they've got some there. Pretty sure. It's been a long time. But they're really interesting, and it's a really interesting experiment that he did with colors and with paint, and something that no one had ever done before, which was just the whole idea of using your body's motion to create the painting and channeling all that energy and all that passion into your movements, and letting that, your movements are basically expressed in the painting. So to a certain extent, I engage in that in this here. But this was a lot more of a controlled painting. It's a lot more of a drizzling effect rather than a whipping effect, which I have also done. And I got to say, it's kind of fun whipping that paint out all over the place. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you stopping by. I'm going to do more of these in the future and talk about other different kinds of artwork. One more thing I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to zoom in to allow, kind of like what I'm talking about, if you start to see what's in the different layers, and all the different things that are happening, and all the ways the different colors interlace and overlap one another. Kind of a nice little thing to engage the eye in. But thank you for stopping by, and I will be doing more of these in the future. Take care and have a great day.